some monster stories begin in castles. Point Pleasant begins in a weapons plant left to rot behind the trees. North of town, the West Virginia Ordnance Works once made TNT for World War II at industrial scale. After the war, the factory became roughly 8,000 acres of bunkers, ponds, weeds, and rumors nobody could mow down. The EPA later treated that ground as a contaminated Superfund problem, not a spooky theme park. Locals called the whole scar the TNT area because subtlety apparently took the night off. By 1966, teenagers drove there after dark to test courage against concrete. Headlights found sealed igloos, broken fences, black ponds, and woods that swallowed sound before it could testify. It was the kind of place where your imagination brings its own shovel. Then 4 people said something came out of the dark before imagination could help them invent it. Late on November 15th, 2 young couples drove through the TNT area after midnight. Near an old generator plant, their headlights caught a tall gray figure. The setting is theatrical, but the first witnesses were not selling a legend. They were young, scared, and suddenly carrying a story that sounds ridiculous until you imagine saying it to a sheriff. The witnesses said it had wings folded behind it and eyes burning red. Not shiny red, not reflected red. The story insists the eyes made their own light. The couple slammed the car into motion and fled toward the highway. That should have ended it, because cars generally win arguments with swamp creatures. But they said the thing rose behind them and followed without flapping, like gravity had resigned. The speedometer climbed toward 100 miles an hour on rural road nerves. The shape stayed with them, silent and level, just above the car, close enough to own the roof. No wings beating. No engine. Just the black math of pursuit. By the time they reached town, they were not doing folklore anymore. They went to law enforcement with a story nobody sane would want attached to their name. Officers checked the area and found no monster, only the darkness waiting for overtime. The newspaper printed the account, and Point Pleasant inherited a public nightmare with a name forming in the margins. The report should have died there, safely stuffed into local oddball history and county eye-roll storage. The report does not prove a monster. It proves several witnesses were frightened enough to invite public ridicule instead of quietly driving home. Instead, curiosity flooded the old plant with cars, rifles, flashlights, and bad decisions with headlights. Men walked into contaminated woods looking for a flying nightmare with buckshot. That sentence alone deserves its own safety pamphlet and probably a helmet. More residents reported red eyes, roof shapes, window shadows, and impossible movement. Every new account taught the next terrified person what fear was supposed to look like. Dogs barked at empty trees. Radios coughed static. Porch lights became interrogation lamps. The town did not just have sightings, it had a sighting weather system. Reporters arrived, strangers arrived, and the creature finally received its permanent name. Mothman was ridiculous enough to laugh at and sharp enough to keep repeating. That is a dangerous combination. Jokes spread faster when they still make you check the window. By the end of the wave, normal life had been dragged into the woods with it, shoes squeaking. Panic does not mean everybody lied. Panic means a town can become a haunted amplifier. One frightened person reports a shape, 10 more start scanning the dark. Then the story did what American folklore loves doing. It grew extra limbs. The creature stopped being only a thing in headlights and became a system with pipes running everywhere. Witness accounts, and later investigators pulled in UFO lights over the river until the sky joined the case. Phone lines reportedly hissed with electronic voices, clicks, and impossible noises. Then came the Men in Black stories, which are bureaucracy wearing a Halloween mask. Dark cars, flat questions. Strangers who seemed rehearsed by something not quite human. Some of those claims are impossible to prove, and that is exactly why they survived. A clean monster can be hunted. A contaminated story leaks under every door and ruins the carpet. Soon, the red eyes were not just animal eyes. They were treated as warning lights. The Mothman had become a prophet, whether the evidence could carry that weight or not. On December 15, 1967, the story met a disaster that needed no wings. The Silver Bridge carried rush-hour traffic between Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Canaga, Ohio. Holiday traffic stacked heavy vehicles across a bridge designed for a lighter age and a thinner America. At about 5 in the evening, one eye bar in the suspension chain failed. The NTSB later identified a cleavage fracture in I-bar 330 at joint C13N. That tiny hidden failure turned the whole bridge into falling machinery before anyone knew what sentence they were in. Cars, steel, lights, and people dropped into the freezing Ohio River. Notice the upgrade. A monster is scary because it might kill you. A prophet is scarier because it might be right. Once that idea lands, every weird light and dead phone line gets promoted. 46 people died, many of them just trying to get home before dinner. There was no prophecy in the official cause. There was corrosion, fatigue, and load. That is the cruelest kind of answer, because it sounds too small for the damage it gets to explain. A town already trained to look upward now had to stare into the river. The bridge collapse turned a strange year into a permanent wound nobody could reduce to engineering. After the collapse, the famous Mothman wave largely faded from the record. This is where the story gets mean. The answer is not cinematic. A critical flaw grew inside steel until the bridge could not carry the day trusted to it. That silence became part of the legend, because silence loves being useful when grief needs architecture. If the creature vanished after the bridge fell, maybe it had been warning them. That idea is emotionally powerful and also unproven. But grief does not shop for explanations with a clipboard and sensible shoes. It wants shape. It wants intention. It wants someone, or something, to blame. Books and films later welded the monster to the bridge until they felt inseparable in public memory. The engineering failure became myth architecture, built from steel, death, and red eyes. Today, Point Pleasant does not hide the Mothman. It puts him downtown in chrome. We want monsters to explain disasters, because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative is that ordinary infrastructure can quietly rust toward failure while people are simply driving home. Tourists pose with the statue, buy shirts, and smile at the nightmare. There is a festival, a museum, and a whole economy built around the scar. That can look tacky from a distance. Up close, it looks more human. A town took the worst year in its memory and gave it a mascot with wings. The TNT bunkers still sit in the trees, concrete slowly losing its argument with moss. The Ohio River still moves past the places where the bridge failed and the story hardened. And the legend still asks whether warnings matter if nobody can prove them until after everything breaks. If Mothman still works, it is because the story refuses to let disaster become paperwork. I am Mason. This is Mason Zero. Keep watching the dark corners of history carefully.